As John said, I'm here in two capacities today. First and foremost as Head of Sustainability at MJMAP, and secondly as Chair of the BBP's new working group, the Managing Agents Partnership. Just a few words before I begin about MJMAP. We're possibly the sort of best-known managing agents that no one's ever heard of. We're quite a small company, just 175 employees. We specialise in property management and focus specifically on the kind of quality of our service delivery. That's achieved across our sort of regional presence in our head office in London, Bristol, Manchester, and Glasgow. And we kind of see that approach as being essential in sort of like delivering against our values and our ethos. We manage a full range of commercial property asset classes, from office buildings to industrial parks to retail properties, and work with over 3,500 occupiers in 700 buildings currently under management or so. We're quite lucky insofar as we are a small privately owned business, so the values that the business kind of extols kind of goes through all of our strategic and our operational management. In terms of our client base, we work with a broad range of clients, from property owners to investment and asset management companies, and we've actually sort of grown our business over the sort of a few years since the downturn, from increasing the instructions from our existing client base, as well as winning new instructions on the back of the quality of our service. So the focus of today is on the commercial property sector. So I took these statistics from a Property Industry Alliance report that was published recently, slight differential to the presentation earlier, but broadly similar. So there's around 7.5 billion square feet of commercial property in the UK, and around half of that space is rented space. That rented space has average lease length of around 6.8 years, but if you factor in break clauses into that, it brings it down to just below 5 years. Commercial properties are responsible for 10% of the energy consumed in the UK. If you factor in non-domestic, that goes to 15%, and then add in the domestic, and we get to the 40% of today's event. So I came across these images on a commute home recently, which showed a sort of idea of London in 2045, possibly linking into some of the stuff Ben was talking about around what are the kind of known unknowns. And this is London imagined by futurologists, with kind of towering buildings, no doubt dripping in sort of biophilic design and flexible workspaces and all this wonderful stuff that we talk about. But then I looked at the date, which was obviously, for those more observant amongst you, was Back to the Future Day, and it kind of made me realise that this was how 2015 was meant to look like. So it does kind of make you wonder whether these 25 to 30 year horizons, how kind of accurate they are. So a lot of discussions around sustainability in the built environment focus on how we can build buildings better, how we can kind of make sort of start from scratch and build a super sustainable building. Technology and construction methods are developing rapidly. We all know this, as is the understanding that we have to make significant changes to every aspect of kind of business as usual. But the reality is that 70% of the buildings that are around today will still be here in 2050, and around half of those were constructed prior to 1970. So while new building design presents us with an opportunity to look at what is possible, the achievement of sustainability will depend significantly on our ability to refurbish, retrofit and manage our existing built environment, whatever their location, to meet the low carbon, low resource and high social return requirements that the concept demands. Each of the key stakeholders in the operational phase of the property lifecycle have priorities that can be addressed through the delivery of sustainability at every phase. There's some work done by the BBP in their Green Lease toolkit, which looked into this in more detail, with investors being concerned with managing the risk from their investments. That's risk from legislation and regulation, and wider, less tangible risks, such as those we've talked about earlier around flooding, risks of climate change, but also the changing requirements of occupiers over time. They're also concerned with protecting the value of their investments over the period for which they are held. Owners are seeking to increase the demand for their buildings, both from investors and from occupiers. They're also concerned with managing similar risks to the investors. While the occupiers want low running costs, low staff turnover and high productivity, They may also have their own CSR objectives to meet or their own statutory regulations to comply with around their own sustainability performance. Well-designed and well-managed buildings can meet these needs, but aren't always provided, which can cause tensions between each member of the property management life cycle. So this is a slide which you may be familiar with, the vicious cycle of blame. Despite the adoption of sustainability presenting an opportunity to deliver value to the owner, the occupier and the investor, and there being an apparent demand, as events like today's shows, sustainable buildings are not often delivered. Owners and investors say that they would fund sustainable buildings, but don't perceive there to be a demand. Developers say that they would push for sustainability to be included in their designs, but believe it would not be funded. Contractors are able to, more than capable of delivering sustainability in the design, but aren't asked to, while occupiers would like to occupy a sustainable building, but don't always have the choice. Now, with the present company as well, and I know there's like a lot of owners and developers here that take a different approach to this, and this is obviously a simplistic view of a sort of very complex set of issues. There are lots of other factors in play. We touched on earlier around whether or not green buildings are worth more than a standard kind of brown building, and studies have proved inconclusive in this regard. As they tend to focus either on current market trends as opposed to attempting to factor in future obsolescence or declining returns, or they focus on small sample sizes, often just one, to illustrate a specific point, which can lead to confirmation bias in those studies. But there are signs of an evidence base developing which might prevent the industry from kind of potentially sleepwalking into something of a disaster. Most large property developers, as I mentioned, have committed to building sustainably and into trying to predict future demands, but even that comes with inherent risk. And what about the existing stock of buildings in towns and cities across the UK? When we talk about sustainability and talk about the built environment, we do tend to focus on London or large urban centres, but there are commercial properties the length and breadth of the country which also need to be addressed. Occupiers might vote with their feet and move to green buildings or demand improvements to the ones they occupy. But increased regulation, as we're seeing now with the likely impact of MEES, let alone future legislation, as we edge closer to the 2050 targets, means that certain assets may well just be written off, which obviously has its own kind of implications in terms of embodied carbon. Reading the studies that are sustainability focused make it easy to be positive, and I think as sustainability professionals we are sort of quite an ideological bunch, and we think that everything's going to be okay because the penny will drop finally. But a recent survey commissioned by Hermes had a chapter in there called Responsible Capitalism and Sustainability, which found that almost half of respondents saw environmental and social governance issues as unimportant, and around the same issues see regulated areas such as energy efficiency also as unimportant in their investment decisions. The results of the survey suggest that the real estate investment is still looked at over short-term financial cycles, and the sector, despite the sector warranting and rewarding a long-term view, a long-term approach. In the same study, specifically in relation to pension funds, only 37% of respondents felt that any consideration should be given to whether investments will contribute to the greater quality of life of their beneficiaries once they retire. So, proving that green buildings are, or soon will be, more valuable than standing buildings is certainly something of a holy grail in triggering sort of true transformation of the market and full adoption of sustainability amongst property owners. The alternative is to risk the concept of stranded assets becoming a reality in relation to property. The table on the screen here now was produced by the Institutional Investors Group on Climate Change and explored various conditions that might realise this. If accepted as likely scenarios, the ifs in the first column there would catalyse wider development of green buildings, encourage existing buildings to be retrofitted and refurbished, assuming there's no legal imperative already, and promote the proactive management of buildings to realise their potential performance. Which is where we come in as managing agents, for a huge number of properties at least. So, RICS suggests three key principles for a managing agent to kind of base their business on. One is they need to manage the property on behalf of the landlord, which I guess is pretty much a given. Second, to manage the third-party suppliers who carry out those operations which they don't carry out themselves. And thirdly, to provide a primary duty of care to the landlord and a secondary responsibility to the occupiers of those properties. While we of course get instructions to manage new buildings with all the bells and whistles that a sustainability professional could hope to see, the majority of our property falls into the 70% category that we were talking about earlier in terms of the older properties that are standing today, still around in 2050. Ours as agents is generally an operationally focused role, managing the property day to day, liaising with our clients and with the occupiers of the buildings we manage to ensure the expected standards are maintained. Aspects of sustainability have always been part of a managing agent's role, although largely focused on budgets and cost management. Key areas have always been under scrutiny around occupier satisfaction, energy management and legislative compliance. The link, though, has not always been clear, and the execution has not always had the most optimum of outcomes. So the imperative now is to look at how we can manage buildings better and how they can be made more efficient within the agreed budgets before looking at capital spend as part of any asset management business plans. This requires a rethink of the market view of the managing agent role and a look at the content of existing property management agreements and contracts serves to illustrate this. So the table on the screen now, which I think you can probably see to the back there, was a result of a poll that was conducted by the BBP on 9 managing agents, which found that all bar 2 have an obligation to maintain legal compliance. So clearly the legal compliance is managed elsewhere by those 2 agents. While all 9 have a requirement to provide data and reporting. But of those 9, only 4 make any effort to specify specifically sustainability-related reporting in that. Only 2 of those are required to engage with occupiers, and only 1 is required to ensure that any training is provided to those employees of the managing agents working on those particular instructions. The content of these documents forms the basis of the relationship between managing agents and their clients, and illustrates some of the challenges that we as agents face in playing our full part in delivering a sustainable built environment. Thinking back to the responsibilities outlined by RICS, the primary duty of care is absolutely accepted. They're our clients, we work for them. However, a key challenge is the diverse approach to property management that each client might take. Clients generally have one of 3 different investment strategies. Firstly, a defensive approach, which is defined as investment practice that adheres only to written law. Secondly, a responsible approach, defined as maximising the positive effects and minimising the negative effects of property ownership, management and development on society and the natural environment in a way that is consistent with investor goals and fiduciary responsibilities. That definition would, however, allow for an investment strategy to be considered responsible, even if the maximisation of positive effects and minimisation of negative effects takes place in the tight boundaries set by prevailing financially orientated short-term goals. The third way is the sustainable approach to property investment, which bears a lot of similarities to the responsible approach, but it ensures that appropriate conditions are laid down so that investment actions are all aimed at being sustainable. These differing strategies make it difficult to adopt consistent standards for agents, particularly when these are best practice standards, not only across clients, but also across diverse portfolios. Data collection, as we spoke about in the presentation before and earlier on today, drives pretty much everything and also becomes challenging in this context. There are no recognised minimum standards across managing agents, which makes it difficult to demonstrate differentiation and value add. If the baseline isn't recognised, then demonstrating leadership is a challenge. Managing agents are resourced to meet the requirements of the property management agreements and contracts. So if sustainability isn't included, proper resourcing is challenging. This can mean that sustainability is added to the role requirements of existing employees who either have a personal interest or didn't step back quite quick enough. Either way, this can lead to a lack of knowledge and experience in implementation and in keeping pace with evolving policy, opportunities and best practice. So it's always easier to focus on the challenges, on the reasons why it's difficult to kind of move things forward and make some changes. But as commercial organisations, managing agents need to look upon these challenges as opportunities. Opportunities to demonstrate leadership with our clients, opportunities to leverage our knowledge and set the standards for property management, to establish the reporting protocols to be used and applied across various asset classes, and to ensure those protocols are in line with known parameters set by statutory requirements, the known knowns, the CRCs, the ESOS, the respondents, the questions in the GRESB survey. But also opportunities to promote medium to long-term management plans that address wider risks, protect and add value. So, for those who aren't aware, I know there's a number of members in the room and a few representatives from the BBP here today, but the BBP is a collaboration between the UK's leading property owners with an overall goal of delivering market transformation around sustainability in the property industry. The membership currently consists of 27 different companies who have around £180 billion of assets under management, covering just under half a billion square feet. Since their inception in 2008, they've produced many practical outlets, and these have been made public with the aim of delivering the targeted change within the industry. Their toolkits around green leases, metering, benchmarking, and retrofit have become widely used go-to guides in these areas. But with the primary focus on property owners, there had been a lack of engagement historically by the BBP with the managing agent community. This was recognised as being a missed opportunity in delivering against its core aim, given the proportion of the UK's commercial property that is managed by agents. Discussions began around the development of a BBP forum for managing agents in earnest towards the end of 2014, with the partnership launching in June 2015, with 10 of the UK's leading managing agents forming the membership at launch. Between us, we manage 26,000 properties across a bit over 1 billion square feet of retail space. Despite the managing agent sector being a traditionally less collaborative sector due to competition that exists between us for instructions, there is also a recognition that sustainability will only be achieved through wider knowledge sharing. Unfortunately, the industry seemed to agree, with the partnership launch being well publicised and well received. To address the challenges mentioned earlier and the content and trajectory of the Managing Agents Partnerships work programme was discussed at length and agreed as needing to be built from the foundations up. The initial output being developed is designed to address one of the key challenges outlined earlier around creating a core set of requirements for the reporting of environmental metrics that can be used by all agents to improve their approach to non-financial reporting or encourage them to start in the first place. These really cover the basics: energy, waste, water, procurement, handover requirements to make life easier for us all. We're hoping that work will be completed in the new year, by which time we'll move on to the second part on the good practice guidance. This is really to be used by agents who either have greater ambition themselves or those who are working with clients who are prioritising sustainability for their portfolios or funds. And these will build on the core requirements to look at how we can use that data to paint a bit of a picture of those buildings' performance, benchmarking the kind of more extensive reporting, but also bringing in wider material issues around sustainability, around the kind of social aspects, ecology and biodiversity, or the kind of training requirements. These documents, which kind of consist of the what's required, will then be kind of formed into a revised managing agents toolkit to update the existing document that was developed in 2011 and ensure currency, applicability, and hopefully a wider uptake within the sector. Having this work produced by managing agents we see as being essential in ensuring it is pitched to be understood by other agents, but having this work delivered by the BBP is absolutely essential in ensuring that all the outputs are reviewed, discussed and approved by the membership prior to being finalised to ensure, firstly, the credibility of the content, and secondly, that property owners, our clients, recognise this as being a property industry initiative to be used for the advancement towards a more sustainable future. Thank you.